Welcome today to my session on Power BI and Azure Databricks, a magical union. And this session has been organized by Data Platform Virtual Summit 2022. So thank you guys for inviting me to deliver this session today. Now, before we start the session, I would really like to reveal one thing. Like today, I'll be playing kind of a double role with you guys. So I'm presenting live, and along with that, I'll also be available in chat to answer any question that you guys have. So please type in your questions in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer them. Now, before we start anything, let's just thank our sponsors. So special thanks to Microsoft for supporting this event, because if there are no sponsors, then there are no events, right? So that kind of support is really needed. So thank you so much for sponsoring the event. And then the other thing is, there are 3 ways to win prizes at today's event, guys. So if you post your selfie with hashtag DPS2022 and give sessions a conference feedback, and also visit sponsors and exhibitors, area, then you can win prizes. So please follow us on Twitter, and also, post your selfie with hashtag what you like about the event, what you don't like about the event. Do give that feedback, because that's really important for even the events organizers and also we as speakers to understand what you guys like, what you don't like, and this definitely helps us in improving. So just go and do that. Now, before I start the session, I would really like to give a little introduction about myself. So those who don't know me, my name is Pragati Jain. I'm a Microsoft Data Platform MVP. I'm a super user at Microsoft Power BI community. So those who don't know about Microsoft Power BI community, please go and search about it, because it's an amazing forum where you can really learn a lot about Microsoft Power BI. I myself have learned a lot from there. So just go and join the forum, and you'll just love the community there. They just love helping people with anything. And I've got nearly 10 plus years of industry experience, and currently I'm working as a senior consultant at Avanade here at London. I'm also organizer at Data Weekender conference. The last conference that we had was on 14th May, and this conference is completely based on the data platform technologies, so everything related to Microsoft stack. I'm also a manager at Microsoft Power BI UK user group. So any of you guys, if you really want a platform to start your maybe speaking journey, or if you're an established speaker as well and want to share your knowledge with the community, then definitely reach out to me. We can really, it will be an honor to have you guys to speak for us and share your knowledge with the community. Then one fun fact about me is, like, I'm a painter, and I just like to proudly call myself a techie artist. And any of you guys, if you really want to connect with me on social networking platform, then I've got my own blog, that is datavibe.co.uk. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, and as I said, I'm also at Microsoft Power BI community, and I've got my own YouTube channel as well. Now today, as we are going to talk about Power BI and Azure Databricks, right? So before we start, let's just talk a little bit about what is Azure Databricks. Now, Azure Databricks is basically an analytics platform which helps you to interact with the Azure cloud services. So if you see this simple diagram, if I just highlight few things in there, so Azure Databricks is quite helpful with interacting with different kind of storage areas like Azure Data Lake Storage, Azure Data Warehouse, Apache Kafka, Azure Blob Storage, and so on. And it kind of works as a platform which people from different areas can interact with as well, like people coming from data science team, data engineering team, and so on. And also with different applications like deep learning, ML, streaming, data warehousing, and Power BI, which we are going to talk about today. So I'll just keep it very basic, because in this session, I really want to tell you more around how we can integrate the Azure Databricks capabilities with Power BI tool, right? So let's just keep it at a basic level, because it's more like a beginner session to show you those kind of capabilities. Now, obviously, when we talk about Azure Databricks, and if any one of you guys are looking to start your journey with it, I think the first question that comes to everyone's mind is like, how you get started with it. So first thing about that is, like, when you want to use any of the Azure cloud services, you need to create an account for it, okay? Now, when I talk about account, you basically go to Azure, portal.azure.com, create your account, and once you register for the first time, you get some free credits, okay? And that's kind of called a Azure trial license. And in that Azure trial license, you can do few things and use and try a few things within Azure environment. But Azure Databricks, if you want to use Azure Databricks capabilities, then that is unfortunately not covered in the Azure trial license. So you'll have to go and buy a pay-as-you-go license if you want to explore Azure Databricks capability. And you can easily get your license. One good thing about the license is it is pay as you go. So how much you use, you pay for it. It's not like you just buy the license for say 1 year, but you don't do anything on that. Okay. So one thing about that is like you can just use pay as you go. Now, the second thing is once you start with Azure Databricks, I think you really need to have that basic kind of knowledge around Spark, because obviously Spark is a platform where you can, handle big data. And also the good thing about Spark is you can write your, transformations or queries in different kinds of languages. So it kind of supports a few different languages like Python, Scala, R, SQL. So if you have experience on any one of these languages, you can just get started with this, Databricks environment. And then the third thing, which is like a prerequisite, is like you should have some basic knowledge around, how you connect Power BI with Azure Databricks as well. So let's just, start exploring things. Okay, let's not go more into the deck and on these theoretical things. Let's just now start exploring. Now let's start with going to Azure portal. Okay, so once you go to portal.azure.com, sorry, let me open the right window, right? So when you go to azure.portal.com, you kind of see a few things there. Once you log in, this is the home page. Basically, here is where you will land. Okay, and once you land here, you can see there are so many things there. Now, first thing, whenever you want to use Databricks capability or any kind of capability within Azure, you need to set up a predefined environment for that capability. Okay, whether it is Azure Databricks, whether it is Azure Machine Learning Studio or anything. Okay, so now as we want to use something called Azure Databricks, we need to first create, an environment for it, which we can use to, run our query, transform our query, do all the bits that we want to do here. Okay, so for that, the first thing what you do is you create a resource. Okay, and that is something you go from here. So if you click on create a resource, so it's like creating a resource group. So resource group is again a kind of, what kind of resource you want to create. Now here we want to use Azure Databricks. So with the resource that we want to use is Azure Databricks, right? So you just go there and type Azure Databricks. Okay, and just select that. Once you select that, a window appears and you just click on create. Now once you hit create, you'll see that on this window there are certain options that you need to fill. Okay, fill those options. So like fill your sponsorship, what you have got, and maybe create a new resource group name. So like for example, we can create resource group Azure Databricks. Okay, hit OK. And then the second thing is you have to give a name to the workspace. So within our resource group, you create a workspace as well. So workspace is again the part of the environment that you're setting up to use these Azure Databricks capabilities, right? So again, let's give it a name as workspace Azure Databricks. Okay, and just leave the other settings there and the options selected there. We don't need to go into detail. These are the default options selected for you. So once you're getting started, you really don't need to go into detail of that. Okay, then hit review and create. Once you hit review and create, then what it does is it kinds of start validating the resource group name and workspace name and all the options that you have selected, right? And once you hit create, it will create this resource group and workspace for Azure Databricks for you. Now I'm not doing a create because I have already created that beforehand, before starting the session, because sometimes this kind of takes a little bit of more time to create it. So what I'll do is I'll again go to my home, and here you can see I've already got a Azure Databricks resource group created along with my workspace. Now once these two things are created for you, the next thing what you do is you click on Azure Databricks workspace. It could be of any name, so whatever you have created will be, seen there. So once you click on there, you end up on this window, and here we just go and launch the workspace. Now once we go and launch the workspace, that's fine. You can just click on the credentials that you're using, and that's fine. it will take you to the Azure Databricks environment basically. Okay. So now once you log in and everything is authenticated, you come to this Azure Databricks environment. Now this Azure Databricks environment is, it may be familiar to few of you who are already attending this session, who are coming from say data engineering or data science background, because these guys really use that at a heavy side. But I just feel like it is kind of a myth, like Azure Databricks is just for data engineering or data scientists. No, it's not. It's also for the analysts like us who really want to do some kind of root level analysis before generating those insights and stories for the customer. So I truly believe like this is the environment which we should make most of it, because you just bring in your data here. You can try to do all kind of transformations here, what you really feel are right for the kind of analysis you're trying to do. And also on top of that, if you feel like you can do all the transformations here rather than doing it in Power BI, then it's good, right? Because sometimes when you are working with big data, then obviously handling all kind of transformations within Power BI could be challenging, because obviously Power BI is not built to handle like say billions of rows transformation, right? You need another area where you can do all these heavy lifting and all kind of heavy transformations, and then you bring the transform data to Power BI, because it will be easier for Power BI to handle things. It will be less burden on the tool, right? So that's why we need something like this to be used before bringing things into Power BI. So this is what Azure Databricks environment is. Okay, so here at the top you can see you can create few things. You have got the workspaces going on. If I click on the workspace and under users, like you can see I've got 2 users going on. If I go to my current user, I can see I've created like 3 different notebooks there, right? So whenever you create a notebook, that comes up under your username. Okay, so let's go back there. And okay, so now first thing, now you have created a resource group, Azure Databricks resource group. You have got a workspace for your Azure Databricks capability. Now, once you have these 2 things, created, the next thing what you really need to think about is like, once you start writing those queries or transformations in this environment, who is really going to handle those things? Who is the, driver behind running these queries or executing these queries for you in this environment? So that is something is known as cluster. So if you see this compute area and if you click on there, so obviously when you want to run some queries, write some transformations, you need to make sure you already have that driver ready behind. So when you hit run or execute your queries, there's someone to execute them, right? So that is, for that purpose, you create a cluster in this environment. Now I've already got 2 clusters, but I'll just show you how to create a cluster. So once you hit on create cluster, you give it a name, so say AD cluster. Okay, and we just go with the standard options because obviously this is the beginner session, so I'm just not going into detail what these things are about, but we just go with the standard options and I just hit create cluster. Now once I create cluster, what this Azure environment is doing, it's kind of creating that cluster for you in this environment and trying to bring it up. Okay. And if you go to the clusters, I can show you how that happens. So for example, when a cluster is running, a green, tick mark is against it. When it is not executing or running, there's a gray mark. And when it is trying to come up, because we have created a new cluster, right? So it's kind of creating that cluster and trying to, bring that up. So that's what is happening here. Okay. But let's just leave this cluster, let it get created, because once it gets created, it will be in the it will be in the state that is shown here for my cluster. Okay, so let's just use this cluster for now. Okay, because once this is up and running, it will be in the same state as this my cluster. So now, how you create a notebook? The first thing. So we go to workspace, we go to create, and under create, there are multiple options, right? So we already created a cluster, right? I'm not going into creating job pipeline or repo or AutoML experiment because that's not something I'm going to cover in this session. I really want to focus more on how you bring these, capabilities with Power BI as a bigger solution, right? So what we really want to do is we want to create a notebook right now. Okay, so I'll click on a notebook. And once I click on a notebook, it asks me a name. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just give it a name like DPS session notebook. Okay. Now, once you create a notebook, you can see that here you have got like default language set as Python. But if you expand this option, you can see the different, three other languages going on there. So these are the 4 languages that Azure Databricks environment support. So it is Python, Scala, SQL, and R. So suppose if you're coming from a database background, then your SQL will be pretty strong, right? So you can get easily started with this environment because you already know SQL. If you're coming from a data science background, mostly data scientists still use R. I know some of them have started using Python now, but mostly they still use R. So if you're coming from R background or you have got an expertise with R language, then you can start working on Databricks right away. If you're coming from Java or Scala background, so you can straight away start writing the Scala code. And suppose if you're a person who knows Python, then you can just start, writing your Spark notebook. Writing your notebook code in Python here. So what I'll do is I'll choose Python because I'm more near to Python when compared to other things. I'm good at SQL as well, but I would try to use Python in this session, okay? And what I'll do is, the next thing is you need to select the cluster that you want this notebook to get attached to. So anything you're running in this notebook, which cluster you want to, drive those calculations or transformations or, query running. So in this case, I'll choose my cluster only because it is already up and running. The new one is still, trying to come up. So we'll just use the one that we have already got. So I'll just choose my cluster and hit create. Now, once I do that, a new notebook is created, which is like an empty notebook, okay? There's nothing in there. So one thing about this is in notebooks, there's something called different cells. So this is the first cell, which is empty right now. But if we write something there, we can keep on adding, more cells above it or below it, the way you want to do it, okay? And once there's something, then you can, run that part of the cell as well. And in my case, I'm using Python, but suppose if you change your mind, you can actually change the language as well. Like, okay, suppose I don't want to write in Python, I want to write in SQL, then you can switch your, language within that notebook as well. But we'll keep the Python for now. Now, the first thing what I really want to show you is like, obviously in Azure Databricks, you can bring data from, different environments, or you can even bring, you can upload files and use the data from those files to, transform here and do the kind of analysis you want to do. But one thing that I really want to show here is like in Azure Databricks, Microsoft has already given some inbuilt data sets which you can use to, start your journey with. You really don't, there's nothing stopping you on the way that, okay, I don't have a decent data set to start my Azure Databricks journey. There's nothing like that, right? So what you really need to do is, there are already available data sets. So like I'm using one of the free available data sets. I can just show you what other data sets we have got here. So this is what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to retrieve all the Databricks available data sets in this environment. And what I'll do is I'll just go and run it. So I'm just running this cell. That's why it is taking that time, okay? And once we have that, it takes some time because it's trying to retrieve all the kind of data sets available. So you can see there are some data sets available for COVID. You can see there are some airline data sets related to Amazon, then Atlas, bike sharing, CCTV videos, credit card fraud, and so on. But what I have done is I'm kind of trying to use a data set which is related to New York green taxi. You also have data related to New York yellow taxi trip data, but I'm using New York green taxi trip data here, okay? So that's what I am using. So I'll be using just, some files. I'm just not using like everything from there because if you see the data for this New York green taxi starts from 2013, and I think you have got data till 2019, but I'm for the sake of this demo, I'll just take data for year 2013, okay? So now I've already got a cell here, which I, added earlier. So what I'll do is I'll just paste my another command that I want to do. So what I'm really doing in this command, I'm actually not writing everything from scratch, guys, because this is not a PySpark session. It's more around using Azure Databricks capability with Power BI. So I'm just using my ready notebook commands here just to show you how things are working on. So the first thing we do is we obviously load the data, right? Because we need data to work with. So what I'm doing is I'm just loading the New York green taxi data for trip data for 2013. Okay. And once I have that, I just run the cell. Now it kind of loaded the data. Okay. Now once the data is loaded, now the next thing we need to do is we need to get this data into shape of a data frame. Now, if any of you guys are coming from, if you guys have got, background in R or Python, then you may know the concept of, data frames. So R and Python, these two languages work on the concept of data frame, and data frame is nothing more than, it's like just consider it like Excel table format where you have columns and rows, and that's something we call data frame in Python and R. So the next thing what I'm doing is the data what I loaded in my data here, my data object here, I'm just trying to turn it into a taxi data frame. And this is the command that we use to turn that data into data frame. So spark.read.format. Now these were CSV files. Okay. So my files were into CSV files. I want all the headers. I want my headers on the data as well. So that's why I'm choosing this option header as true and just loading it. So what I'll do is I'll just run it. It may take few seconds because obviously it's 1 year worth of data and there were so many files for it. So it may just take some time, but once it is loaded, then everything on that data is pretty fast. So we just need to wait for it to load. And once the data is loaded, okay, so now the data is loaded and you can see there are 2 steps shown. These are your Spark jobs, like these jobs ran to convert this to data frame. And the other thing is you can actually see the whole structure of the data. You can see all the columns which are in this taxi data frame. And against that taxi data, you can clearly see it is a PySpark.sql.dataframe.dataframe. So it's a data frame kind of object. Okay, this PySpark. Okay, so when we say Python in Spark or Databricks environment, it is called as PySpark. So if you use SQL, it will be Spark SQL. If you use R, it will be Spark R. So that's just the terminology going on. So yeah, just don't get confused with that. The coding is very much same, only with few, tweaks in it. So now let's view the data. Now, once we have already loaded the data in this taxi data frame, let's just kind of try to, view the top rows from the data. So I'm just using a display function here, which kind of, just shows the top 1000 rows in the data set. And what I'll do is I'll just run it. Now, once I run it, it will display the top 1000 rows for me. I mean, you can scroll that down and see those top 1000 rows, but obviously I'm not scrolling till the 1000th row. But yeah, you can see all the columns it has loaded, like vendor ID, pickup time, drop off time. Then you can see pickup longitude, latitude, drop off longitude, latitude, and then so on. And you can also see passenger counts with the trip distance, fare amount, extras, tip amount, toll amount, right? You can see the trip type as well, payment type as well, and so on. That's fine. So the first thing we have already done, we have loaded the data in a data frame. Now it is good to go and we can start working with it, okay, and start with the analysis. Now, whenever I start with the analysis, the first thing I do on any data is, just count the number of rows in the data just to understand, what's the size of data I'm dealing with. So let's do a simple count on this data. And what I'll do is I'll just click this, copy this, sorry. Okay, so we'll just write it. So this is taxi data. So taxi data is the name of the data frame, and I'm running a count on this function. I'm running the count on this object, okay? And I'll just run cell. Oh, sorry, did I take a wrong name? Oh, sorry, my second. Okay, so here make sure that, because this is kind of case sensitive, so I had my taxi data naming as this. So make sure you're writing the right naming convention. I mean, you're using the right naming convention. So we can clearly see, there are nearly 1.2 million records in this table that we have loaded, or in the data frame that we have loaded. So that's the size of the data we are dealing with. Now let's try to do some kind of, transformations like in this area. Now, if you see this was the, data that we have, or the data that we loaded, right? Now, if we scroll to the right, there's something called payment type. Okay, but if you scroll down, you see payment type is like 1, 2, 3. I mean, it's like a numeric number. Okay. Now think from the point of view, like suppose if you want to represent this payment type or you want to do some analysis on the payment type with the strip data and you want to present this to your audience. Now, obviously, payment type as 1, 2, 3 won't make any sense, right? You really need to have a definition behind those numeric numbers going on in this column. So, that data is more representable. So basically, representing your data in a better way can sometimes, lead you to do some kind of transformations. Now, obviously, when I started with this data, I was clueless on, what this, payment type thing is going on. So for that, what I did, obviously, as I said, like these are the data sets, freely given by Azure. Microsoft Azure. So obviously, there should be definition around these data sets somewhere. So what I did was, if I go back to my presentation, so there is this link, okay, where Microsoft has given kind of these are basically all Azure open data sets. So New York taxi, green taxi trip data is also openly available data set. So what I did was I literally went to that data set and tried to understand the definitions around those columns. So if you come down, you can see all these columns that we've just loaded. And if you come down, there's something called payment type. And we have a clear definition around that payment type. Like 1 means credit card, 2 means cash, 3 means no charge, 4 means dispute, and so on. So if I convert these numeric numbers in my payment type column to this sensible naming convention like credit card, cash, etc., then it would just help me to represent my information in the right way in a tool like Power BI, right? So let's do that transformation, okay? So what I'll do is I'll go back to our notebook. And what I'll do is I'll add another cell, okay? I just like to keep things clean. That's why I just keep on adding the cell so I know in what cell what's happening. And if in future I really want to just run one of the cell, I can just go and run that cell rather than having all the code in a single cell. So what we'll do is, first of all, let's just see how many distinct values are in this column, okay? We need to make sure it aligns with the definition that's given on this Azure, freely available open dataset definition, right, on this page. So what I'll do is I'll just run this cell. And when I run this, so I'm just selecting payment type column from my taxi data frame and doing a distinct on it and showing those distinct values. So I can see there are 4 distinct values going on here. Okay, that's fine. Now let's try to, transform this value. So for transformation, I'll just copy the piece of code I wrote to transform this because I'm just not going to write it again. So what is this doing is basically in PySpark, if you want to use some kind of functions, right? So you need to import some kind of packages. So that's what I've done. I've imported 2 packages and then I've just used them to do this transformation. And what I'm doing is I'm just replacing payment type value with the string value that I found on the Azure Open Dataset page definition, okay? So what I'll do is I'll just run this, okay? Now, once we run this, it kind of got executed quite quickly, right? Now, let's see whether our transformation has gone through. Like what values we see in that payment type column. So what I'll do is I'll run the same command. I'll select payment type and try to show the distinct values in that column and run it. Now once I run it, it is displaying me 4 different string values. Earlier we saw it showed us numeric values, which was 1, 3, 4, and 2. But now it is showing us string values, credit card, no charge, cash, and dispute. So bingo, our transformation has just worked. Now what I'll do is I'll just do a similar kind of transformation on another column and then we'll, start doing some kind of analysis. So what I'll do is there's another column in this data frame, which is vendor type, and it has also got some numeric values going on, which are not not like in the right presentable way. So what I'll do is I'll just modify this column as well, and what I'll do is again I'll add another cell, and what I'll do is, so I'm just doing the same thing, replacing values, run cell, and it just replaced it. It just took like 0.06 seconds. And now if you want to check what are the values in that column again, so just because it's very important, you know, to make sure the transformations that you're doing are right or wrong. So always make sure at every step when you do the transformation, make sure to check whether your transformation has gone through in the right direction or not. So you can see we have replaced these, you know, numeric values with the string values. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Now let's start doing some kind of, you know, analysis. Now for starting, let's say if I, you know, want to get, say, total number of passengers for the trips grouped by different payment type. Okay, so it's kind of a very basic grouping. So what I'm doing is I'm just getting the passenger count grouped by payment type. That's the simple query I'm running here. And when I run this cell, it kind of tells me, okay, by different payment type, how many passengers have been, you know, have used the trips by these taxis. Okay, so that's fine. Now one thing to see here is, like, by default the output is displayed in a tabular form, but here in Databricks there is a capability you can actually display the output in some visuals as well. So if you see, there's an icon called visual icon going on here, right? If I click on that, it kind of displays my data as a bar chart, because by default it has just displayed it as a bar chart. But if I just expand this option, I have got another, you know, different visualizations going on, visualization types going on. For example, pie chart, right? So I can display that as a pie chart as well. And suppose if I want to display it as a line chart, obviously line chart won't work because it's not a trend kind of analysis going on, right? Scatter chart will also not work because we don't have another axis there. But yeah, you can display it in the visual as well. So what you are basically doing is you're trying to analyze your data, but still by visualizing it, you get a more insight around it, like how it is going on. Like most of the passengers have paid by cash while they made their trips with these taxis, and very less of them has paid using credit card. Let's kind of do another thing here. So what I'll do is I'll add another cell. And the other thing here is, like, you can actually click on these plot options. Once you click on the plot options, you can actually change like how you want it to be. Okay, we'll keep it grouped. You can change the aggregations like sum, average, min, max. Okay, you can change the display type, which kind of chart you want to use to display, right? But I'll just keep it simple for now. And also, you know, you can download it. So if you download this, so what it did was it kind of downloaded the data behind this chart. Okay, so that's what you can do with the download option as well. But I'm not going into that because we really don't need to see the download data. Then the other thing is, let's try to do a grouping with let's see if we can, you know, get total tip amount by different vendors. Okay, so again I'll run this cell and it will give me an output where I'll get total tip amount by different, you know, vendor IDs. And again I can display it with, you know, a chart. Obviously it's not making much sense, but yeah, you can choose whatever chart you want. If you want a pie chart, say, you can get a pie chart there, right? So that's how, you know, you can change the type of chart you wanted to display. Now one thing what I really think here in, you know, Databricks is, for example, at the top there's something like view. You can basically create a dashboard out of the outputs, you know, that you have worked with here. Okay, so for example, you can remove things if you don't want them, right? And something like this, you can align them the way you want them to be. Okay, so you can basically create a dashboard here. Okay, that's kind of a good thing. Like, you can create a dashboard in the presentable form. Now the only thing what lacks here from my point of view is you create this dashboard, but how you know, share this dashboard with a wider audience. That's the only thing that, you know, kind of lacks here. So for that, we'll be using Power BI now. So whatever transformations we have done here, we'll take that transform data, import that, or, you know, use a direct query connection in Power BI and then generate some kind of reporting. So what I'll do is I'll go back to our notebook. Okay, so I'm going back to our notebook. This is a notebook, And if I scroll down, now the other thing what I'm doing is, obviously there are so many columns in this data, right? But for the basic analysis at this stage, I really don't want all these columns. So what I'll do next is I'll only select the columns I want further to take in Power BI. Now this is kind of one of the best practices principle as well. Bring only the data that you need for analysis, right? I mean, obviously it's a small exercise that I'm showing, so I'll be only bringing few columns. I know other columns can be useful in this case, but for now I'll just bring few columns for now. So what I'll do is I'll create another cell. So I'll create a cell below this, and I'll just select few columns which I think could be helpful for a small analysis that I'm trying to show as part of the demo. So I'm just selecting these few columns, and once I run that, my taxi data frame has got these few columns. Now the other thing, now once you have done all your heavy transformations in Azure Databricks, now basically once you bring your transform data to Power BI, you are creating less burden on Power BI, right? So that's a good thing. So try to do all the transformations in an area which can actually take all these heavy kind of building rather than doing everything in Power BI. Now in Azure Databricks, once you have got your data ready, you need to write it out, so that if you write it out at a certain place, then you can import that data in Power BI. So in Azure Databricks, what you do is you save this data as a table, and there's a simple command to save this data. I'll just write that out. So I'll just create another cell, and we are just writing our output into this table. And what I'll do is I'll kind of just rename it, because this name already exists there, and if I run this command it will give me an error. So I'll just write it with this name, and what I'll do is I'll just run this query. Now once I run this query, it's kind of writing your data to our storage, and once that data is written in the storage, I'll show you how you can see that. Okay, so it's kind of writing it in a repository, and it kind of says your command is finished. Okay, so now what you do is, under data on the left, if you click on that, you'll see our data is written here, New York taxi green DPS. Okay, so now we have done all the heavy transformations in Azure Databricks. We have just modified the data the way we needed it. We have just trimmed the data. We have already got only the columns that we need. Now the next part is get this data into Power BI so that we can do some kind of visualization, right? So now let me go to Power BI. So I've already opened the Power BI window. So yeah, that's Power BI. Now in Power BI, there is already a connector for Azure Databricks. Okay, so under Get Data, if you go to More, and under More, okay, it will come. There are so many things open on my machine, so it may just take some time, but yeah, let's wait for a few seconds. Sometimes Power BI just challenges me, especially when I'm delivering a session. It just kind of takes time, but yeah, let's wait. It will come there. Let's give it a few seconds. Okay, it's there. Now, if you go into Azure, there's something called Azure Databricks connector. Use that, hit connect. Now, once you hit connect, there will be like few details that we really need to connect to Azure Databricks. Okay, so now that this new window comes up, and it kind of asks you a few details like server host name, HTTP path, and so on. Now I'll show you from where to grab these details. Now go back to Azure notebook. In the notebook, if you go to your settings, go to user settings. Oh, sorry, I'm at a wrong place. Sorry. Go to compute, because these are the connection details, right? Go to your cluster, the cluster which you're using to run this notebook. And under advanced options, if you go to JDBC, ODBC connection details, there's something called server hostname. So that's the hostname that you need to put in Power BI. Okay, so that's your server hostname. Now we need a HTTP path. So go back again, and there's something called HTTP path here as well. So copy that, paste it here. Now it's up to you. You want to bring data in import mode or direct query. Now suppose if you have done all the transformations, especially like, column creation and everything in Azure Databricks, then you can definitely bring data into direct query mode, right? But suppose if your data is quite big, billions of rows, sometimes direct query can give you a performance challenge. So in that case, you can use import mode. But I'll just use import mode for this demo, and I'll just hit OK. Now, once I've given these things, now Power BI should ask us to give some kind of authentication. Yeah. So now you have given already the HTTPS request and your server name and everything for connecting to your Azure Databricks notebook, right? Now, but you need also to authenticate this connection, right? So there are 3 ways of authentication, either by username, password, or Azure Active Directory, or there's something called personal access token. We'll use this personal access token. So to get the token, what you do is go back to your notebook, go back to settings, user settings, and under user settings, there's something called generate new token. So what you do is just generate new token, and you can just write something token needed and just generate. So a token is generated. Just do a Control C, go back to Power BI, add that token and click connect. Now, once you click connect, it will try to, give you access to the repository where your data is written. Okay. So let's see, it will come in few seconds. I think it should be here. Sometimes it takes time, but that's okay. It's doing something. So it's there. Okay. Now there are 2 areas you can see. Let's go to samples first, okay, because I just want to show you something. Now under samples, there are already, some data sets already, available for you to start doing your, Power BI analysis thing, okay. But in this case, what I'll do is I really don't want to bring this data. I want to bring the data that we just transformed and saved. And that is something stored in as a Hive Meta store. So under this, if we go, we actually wrote this data, New York taxi, green DPS. And yeah, we just had few columns in there, and I'll just load this data. Now, once I load this data, it should get loaded. Let's wait for it, because sometimes things take time, but worth waiting, right? Okay, so it's kind of still loading, right? Because I tried to hit that fields area, but it's still kind of, trying to load the data. So it's still loading. Let's give it a few seconds. So once you get the, once your data is loaded in Power BI, then you can actually start creating your report, your kind of beautiful visualizations. And once those visualizations are there, you can actually create this, report with a wider audience. So that's kind of, how you use Azure Databricks and Power BI together. So what you basically did was you actually did all the heavy lifting in Azure Databricks side, but then you brought your transform data to Power BI by providing less burden on it. Because sometimes what happens is in Power BI, as I said earlier, sometimes when you get a lot of rows, or you're dealing with the big data kind of challenges, then it kind of just takes time. So it's always good to do those kind of transformations somewhere else rather than doing everything in Power BI and just adding that burden to your report. So it's always good to do at some place there. So hopefully Azure Databricks could become that kind of area where you can try to do these kind of transformations. So it's kind of loading the data. Okay, we had nearly 1.2 million rows, and I think it has kind of loaded it. Let's just wait for a few more seconds. Okay, in the meantime, when it's loading, let me tell you one more thing. I think it's kind of, okay, it's loaded the data, but okay. I want to, show you one more thing. So we talked about that, for using Azure Databricks capability within Azure, you need to, have a pay-as-you-go license. But suppose if you are still not ready to, use Azure Databricks with some other environment, say Power BI, and you just want to go and learn, say PySpark or, Spark R or Spark SQL, then what you can do is actually, so Databricks provides a free environment, okay, where you can create and execute your notebooks for free, and it won't charge you anything. So when you go to this area, http://communitycloud.databricks.com, I can quickly show it to you. So if you go here, So in this area, I mean, this Databricks area is freely available. Just go and sign up, and you can, just go and start creating your notebooks and other things here. It's exactly similar to what Azure Databricks is. I mean, the layout is completely same. The interactions are same. So if you go here, so I can show you, like, I kind of created few notebooks here some time back, and these are like, just free. I mean, I never signed up for Azure Databricks license some time back, because I never used Azure Databricks capability with any other platform, right? So just to get a hands-on practice with any language, like say if you want to learn PySpark, then use this Databricks environment to get those capabilities, rather than taking a pay-as-you-go license from Azure. So build your coding capabilities here, and once you are good to go, then you can buy the Azure Databricks license and start to use it with other kind of platforms, like say Power BI. So that's kind of a thing I really wanted to tell you. So now the data is already loaded here. We can see in Power BI data is here, and then what you can do is you can just start creating your reports. I mean, it could be anything, like you can start with, say, okay, Power BI is getting really slow, but that's fine. That happens, especially whenever I deliver sessions, but that's okay because I'm used to it. But let's just create something. So for example, if I want to get payment type, and I want to get total amount by payment type, okay, so I can get that here. So yeah, it's kind of takes a little bit time, but yeah, once you have created those visuals, right, then they are pretty quick in refreshing and everything. It's something sometimes when you're just creating it at the first hand, it takes time. So let's wait for it until okay, it's already there, sorry. So yeah, you have got that chart, right? So you can start building those kind of reports using this data. So you have done all the transformations there and just brought that transform data here, so you can bring more data here and start your visualization. But I'm not doing a visualization session here, so I'll just show you a ready report that I have got. So what I did was I created this report some time back, and okay, I think it may take some time to load as well, but yeah, let's just see if it can load quickly, then we'll have it. Okay, it's loading. Okay, let it load. In the meantime, we'll just see what else I've got. Okay, so what I've got other things here is, I've got some kind of resources here going on. Like for example, if you're at a beginner level, then you can actually go and look at some of the Microsoft Learn parts, because they are kind of really good, and especially if you're doing some ML kind of training, if you want to use some kind of ML algorithms and other things, then there are pretty good labs in there as well, so you can go and explore that. And then I've got few blogs here, like for example, if you want to get started with Azure Databricks, you can go and check out msqltips.com as well. They have got pretty good beginner kind of tutorial there, which you can use. Then the Spark tutorial. So if you want to start your journey with Spark, like I said, now in Spark, Spark supports different coding languages, right? We just saw them, like it was Python, R, SQL, Scala. So suppose if you want to start your journey with one of the languages there, you want to get hands-on on that language, then just go and check this area, because they have really given tutorials around all these different languages. And then if you're interested in just coming at PySpark, if you are good at you want to get good at PySpark, then you can just start something with PySpark here. And also I wanted to mention this Microsoft free data sets. You really don't need to worry about like from where I'll get data, how do I start doing these transformations and data crunching kind of exercise. So don't worry about that. Microsoft has already got those free data sets available. So you can just start using them, and you can start your journey with Python or say PySpark. Let's just go back to the okay, so the dashboard just got loaded. So it's a simple one pager report I created for this demo, guys, and it's nothing. It's more like I've got some summary numbers here. So like how many total trips I've seen in the data, trip distances, passengers served. Then here I'm actually using field parameters in Power BI. So currently you can see I've selected vendor as my axis, and I'm currently seeing number of trips by different vendors. But suppose if I want to see number of passengers served by different vendors, so once I click on that, my report will get refreshed for that number. So you can see total number of passengers served by vendor, total amount charged by different vendors, so those kind of things. And suppose if you want to slice the data by payment type, then you can select payment type here. So you can see amount charged by different kind of payment type. So that's what you see here. Similarly, you can see total trips that you have seen with different kind of payment types. So that's how you can use the benefit of Azure Databricks. So basically not doing anything in Power BI, just bring the data that you need to create your analysis and insights and generate that story for the consumers, and just do that here in Power BI rather than doing that heavy building of data, transforming data, engineering here. Do that in Azure Databricks, and then just focus on visualization in Power BI. So guys, this is what I had in today's session, and thank you so much, first of all, for attending this session. This was a beginner session, and I hope you guys got something from this session. And yeah, I'm happy to take any questions in the chat. So please feel free to write your questions in the chat, and it would be great to have a feedback about the session that I've delivered today. I'll paste this feedback link in the chat as well, so you guys can just go and give me some feedback, because this is a beginner session, so I would really love to understand whether how was the session, did you like the session or not, would you like to improve, would you like me to improve something on explaining things, or would you like me to include something in this session for future. So thank you so much if you're writing that feedback, and thank you so much for attending this session. And one thing in the end, thank you for the organizers and sponsors for giving me opportunity to deliver this session on the platform. And to the audience, if you guys really want to connect with me, and if you've got any questions that has not been answered now, or if there is not much time today, then you can definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter. So I'm happy to take your questions there. So thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for attending my session, and I look forward to my previous engagement soon. So thank you so much.